Welcome to Emotion Ships, where we talk about the real reason everything happens for a reason. I am your host, Charlie Carroll, along with my compassionate co-host, Mallory
are you trying to
Redmond.
Butter me up?
Nope, you are compassionate, and I think that's the first time I've said that.
It literally is very much the first time you've said that. Why?
We are live on Instagram.
Why are you calling me compassionate?
Because you are compassionate. Hi, Jess. Good to see you this morning. Making the news this morning. I was in the news.
Jumping right in.
Yeah, no, we're going to jump right in. Have you heard about over the weekend Disney Plus launched Hamilton?
Yes, I heard that.
And have you heard a little bit of the news now that some people are calling to pull Hamilton from Disney Plus due to some of the narrative of the story?
Of course they are.
Have you this cancel culture? What are your thoughts about it?
I mean, in some ways, I think it can be helpful, but there's definitely not a ton of. It doesn't seem like there's a ton of grace.
Yeah.
There's not a ton of room for grace in the cancel culture.
Yeah, my problem with the cancel culture is that it's as if everything was supposed to be perfect. And it's just like, look at your own life and your own story, and I can look at mine, and it's like, you start at a certain place with things that you've inherited, and hopefully as you're pursuing growth and change and putting yourself in the right environments around other people, you come to learn what you thought was normal and okay is not. And I guess part of the problem that I have with the cancel culture is that it's acting as if we inherited something that was perfect, and now we're upset with it because in hindsight, you can always figure out the things that are further away from the standard or that should not have been the way that they are. Mm-hmm. I was reading an article from the Oprah magazine this morning on Lin-Manuel Miranda's response. Mm-hmm. Did you see this in his tweet, which is causing a little more controversy? That he basically, I liked his response, and he just said that, he did his best and he took 6 years to condense the story down into 2.5 hours, which is obviously pretty tough to do. And he even purposefully recast the characters with people of color intentionally.
Yeah.
But yet, what he says here is, I took 6 years and fit as much as I could in a 2.5 hour musical, did my best, but this is what he follows up with. It's all fair game. And some are just criticizing, saying at some point in time, you've got to quit catering to the cancel culture where it's never good enough.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the reasons that I think some canceling is helpful is there has to be some upheaval to dismantle what is unhealthy or unjust.
Give me an example, Mal. Well, what would you cancel?
I mean, I don't know. I don't have anything off the top of my head. I didn't know we were talking about this, so I didn't come in prepared. But I do think if there is, I mean, we are in a society that it has been steeped in, like racial inequity, right?
Yeah.
Like it's just, we were born into it.
Sure.
And so I think that there has to be some like uprooting or like canceling, if is another word for it, in order to shift the paradigm a little bit, right? To like shift the landscape. And so if somebody is in a position of power and they are acting out in ways that are clearly racist, I would cancel that job, right? Like if it got, and we've seen this, we saw this in the Central Park where the woman called the police on the black man who was just asking her to put her dog on a leash. And she has lost her job. She was in a position of authority in her job, and she's lost her job. Unfortunate you lose your job because one thing got recorded on video and shared virally. But I think these are the little things that have to start happening in order to change the landscape of our culture.
These things being the canceling of...
Well, she lost her job.
Yeah. Where part of the problem that I have with it is how realistic it is and the hypocrisy of some of the change where people are not afforded to make a mistake or recognize the way that they have been doing it is wrong without these grave consequences. And I don't know how realistic it is to life.
Well, the alternative is that things keep going the way that they're going. And I don't think that that's been, I think we can all agree that there's room for growth.
Of course.
So there has to be some upheaval. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's uncomfortable and it hurts and it's hard in order for things to shift. And so I think my opinion is that people start to see things like what happened to Amy Cooper. I think her last name was Cooper, in Central Park, and start to question their own behavior or wonder about their own behavior, or how they're behaving in public, especially in the presence of people of color.
Yeah.
And I think Amy's going to probably be fine.
Yeah.
You know, I think she'll be able to find another job. She will move on. She will be okay. But these stories, the canceling, it causes us to kind of, it's like a little whiplash, right? That where we're like, oh, how did that just happen? Or why did that just happen? And I'm not saying that it's always right or it's always helpful, but I don't think that it's unhelpful across the board.
Yeah. One of the things that I think we actually are running into that's a problem is, what is the standard? Like, where is the overall standard coming from? So we get this idea of tolerance, right? That we are to be tolerant, which is accepting the definition. I actually pulled it up here because I was interested in it. Is the ability or willingness to tolerate something, in particular, the existence of opinions or behavior that one does not necessarily agree with, right? The idea of tolerance unintentionally advocates for a standard. And I guess it comes back to what is the standard? What is the standard that we're all supposed to adhere to or live by? Because if, one of the popular notions is you can't tell me how to live or how to believe, where does that stop? I mean, is there such thing as a cry for you to be tolerant of my intolerance? So I'm just asking, like, where is the standard? And again, going back to a couple of episodes, which we never talked about what episode number this is. 24.
24.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Emotion Ships episode 24. Just there's got to be some sort of standard as to, if there is no such thing as absolute truth, and what is right for you is right for you, and what is right for me is right for me. Like, what are we driving as to the standard as to which, if someone wants to be a racist, by what means or grounds do we tell them you can't do that? If it is true that whatever they want to believe is up to them and they have the power of choice. Like, it's almost like there's this hypocrisy involved when we can't get to a place where we say, like, there is certain truths that are concrete that we're all to live by, because we can't have it both ways. We can't say that you have the right to believe whatever you want, and those beliefs influence your behavior to do things that are harmful to others. But yet there is this standard that you are to be tolerant of me and my beliefs. And when you're intolerant, then I'm allowed to be intolerant. Like, there's this never ending cycle. Like, what's the standard? Where do we get the standard? I was just talking to a friend this morning who knew the man here locally who was shot and killed by the police last week in a suburb of Dayton, Ohio, in Kettering. And the friend that I talked to knew this gentleman very well. And supposedly he and his wife got into a fight, and she called the police, and he was sitting in his chair or on the couch at his residence and did not like the fact that the police were coming into his home, fired 2 shots into the air in his home, which that's pretty crazy in of itself. Mm-hmm. And when he was told, now supposedly this gentleman had a track record of being sober for 40 years, and his mission in life was to help other people become sober. Like, contributing to society and trying to make a difference out of the negatives of his story and his past and turning them into something positive, not only in his own life, but in the life of others. Well, supposedly when he did not, so he shoots 2 rounds into the air in his home. And when he does not put the firearm down, the police officers shoot him twice and kill him, and he's gone. And again, coming from a law enforcement background, my whole thing about this is you don't have to shoot him in that situation. As a police officer, and I'm not, overly critical of the police. I don't make a stance of being overly critical unless I know the situation, and then I'll just give my opinion. But even that is not perfect. But it's just like, if he wasn't putting his firearm down, like, back out of the house, figure out how to call in there and negotiate. Like, this is not going to go somewhere good. That's on a normal day, let alone what we're dealing with in society today. But whoever that was got nervous because he was not responding. And I know what my police officer friends would say to me about being in the moment and your adrenaline going and all of that stuff. But my overall point is, people are not robots. There's got to be some sort of standard of right and wrong, good and bad, that we can talk about without it being negated by this idea of whatever is right for you is right for you, and whatever is right for me is right for me. And you need to tolerate what I say is right that you think is wrong, and vice versa. Like, there's a never ending cycle to that, because when I say that people are not robots, meaning like, whether you call it good and bad or good and evil or healthy and unhealthy, like, we're seeing examples over and over and over again of people that are supposed to or need to be healthy in order to do their job, that are not healthy, and then they get in situations and bad things happen. So I was just saying, like, when it comes to the idea of this standard, like, what is the backdrop that we hold everybody to?
Well, I mean, I think we've said here many times that it can't be black and white. There's so much gray area in a society because we are all coming with different experiences. You experience the world differently than I do.
Sure. As
a white male, and me being a white female.
Sure.
And so I don't think it's as simple, though it'd be nice. I don't think it's as simple, but I think we do. I mean, we've said it here before. Maybe the standard is preferring the other person above ourselves.
But if there is a lot of gray, which there is, in the sense that if there is no central concrete truth or standard to live by, then there is an abundance of gray. But our response to when we feel violated says that we don't believe that there's a lot of gray, that we believe there's black and white, right and wrong. But then when we try to hold each other accountable or talk about that, it seems as if we're so afraid to say that there's a standard that we never talk about it, because then it's forcing your beliefs on someone else. And then when something goes wrong, or it's not what we agree with, we rage and pitch a fit because we act as if there are these concrete truths that were violated. But it's just like, you can't be an advocate for whatever I think is right goes, and then when somebody else lives in the same way and that jumps your fence and violates what you think to be right, you raise hell.
But I don't think people always do raise hell. I think we're seeing it more because we're in the midst of this, like, I don't know what to call it other than like an awakening. But I don't think that I don't even know that we could say it's the norm that people raise hell. I guess maybe it depends on who the person is or who the people group is.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people go through life being discriminated against, and that's just what life is for them.
You think that a lot of people go through life being discriminated against, and that's
without
what
raising hell, and they just learn to exist within that system.
Sure. Yeah.
So I don't know that the norm is hell raising.
Well, I don't know, that's hard to say with so many people living in a big world like this. I'm just speaking when it comes to the most recent examples of wanting to get rid of our monuments and statues, and then even simple things like we talked about in episode 23 of, the different Rice Krispies and
To me, if
so on and
someone
so forth.
is saying that something is harmful to them, I hope that my first reaction is to believe them.
Sure.
And to try and do, and so that's why, like, the monuments, it does not change my life that they are up or down.
Sure.
Right? Like, I have an appreciation for U.S. history, and I have an appreciation for the way that the celebration of particular people or events makes other people feel. So, I don't know.
Where does that stop though? And if there is no standard as to if a person is healthy or unhealthy, are all rights treated equally? Is the unhealthy person's perception of the world and what they believe to be right or wrong just as qualified or important to listen to or adhere to as what we would say the healthy person is?
I guess I don't know what healthy versus unhealthy is.
Exactly. And that's what I'm saying. I think.
I mean, but it's a person. At the end of the day, it's a person. So
Sure.
I think you can't have a blanket like this is the standard. I don't think you can. I think we can all make that distinction on our own, but I don't know that.
I think you're right. And I think everything that we're seeing is a result of saying there really can't be this standard that we apply to everyone. And the other side of that is a lot of people are going to feel like their rights or their opinion or their voice is not heard or those things have been violated because there's just like.
But I think that's why cancel culture, people are getting so pissed about it.
Sure.
Because it is the people it's white people that are being canceled. And that's not the norm. They're feeling like their voice is being taken away. They're feeling like their positions of power are being taken away. They feel like they are being nitpicked. Their actions are being nitpicked. And I think people that are in minority groups are saying this is how it feels.
Sure. But I'm even getting one step past that to say that in this specific instance that we're talking about primarily race and people being marginalized and treated unfairly, right? But even broaden that out even further, maybe when it comes to a woman in the workplace versus the color of someone's skin. It still comes back to we are living in a way and our responses advocate for a standard that has been violated. But then when you turn around and say, okay, well, like, let's try to come up with some sort of standard, then it comes back to, well, your beliefs are your beliefs, my beliefs are my beliefs, don't tell me how to live. Well, the problem with that is there's got to be some sort of backdrop or standard that we can agree to if we're going to live in community with one another. We know from episode 23 that the way it works or the way you win in community or in society is to prefer the needs of another person and put their needs in front of your needs. But what we're also saying is, at least in this country, people have the right to say, that's your belief. I don't necessarily believe in it, and I don't have to live in a way that puts other people's needs or concerns or opinions in front of my own. And it just makes for one big mess.
Those are the people that are being canceled.
No, not necessarily.
Many times.
No, not.
I mean, that's what we saw in Central Park.
Well, that's one example, but all across the board, there are a lot of people that say, well, you can't tell me that if I want to live with this situation or in this, like, you can't take this away from me, or you can't tell me who I'm going to live with, or you can't tell me about my body. Like, that is across the board that people still feel like, and I don't know what the percentage is, that another person's views should not be forced on them. I think that's pretty widespread. And I'm just saying that when we get into this situation, we can't have it both ways. And what I see is that there are a lot of people that cry and want for tolerance of their views and their opinion. But what happens if I execute my right or you execute your right to say, like, that's your belief, but I don't think that way. I don't feel that way. Are they called to have tolerance then of my intolerance?
Well, I think that, I mean, what you're describing is like how our society is already existing.
Yeah, and that's what I think. I think we have this huge mess, and ultimately it comes back down to like we can't have it both ways. We can say that like here are my beliefs and here is how I feel, but at the end of the day, if we are going to be a part of a larger society, like we all lose some of our rights to be a part of a greater good. Mm-hmm. But then take it back one step further. Like there still has to be some sort of standard as to whether or not there is such a thing as health and, being healthy or unhealthy, right or wrong. And I think that's really a long way to say. I think this really comes back to we've eliminated a lot of conversation about right and wrong because we tend to interpret someone thinking that the way we're doing something wrong, we tend to interpret that personally. And when you eliminate right and wrong in any society, then there is no backdrop by which people are expected to live.
Are you saying that we need the government?
I'm saying that I think we did ourselves a disfavor when we advocate for unintentionally or our actions would say that we believe in a higher standard, and our responses when we feel violated reinforces that we believe that there's a higher standard that people are to respect when it comes to our life. But when it gets applied to us and we're expected to honor a higher standard when it comes to someone else's needs, that we have trouble with that. I do think we need government. There's no doubt about it. I just don't think I think the government is supposed to be public servants that serves the public and sets up an environment where people can live together. I'm not for the government making choices for people.
Okay. I hear you.
Ladies and gentlemen, here we are on Emotion Ships, episode 24. When I look at it, I think that I think we're responding to, and we're in a unique period of time where maybe because of mass communication and how much we see today with the internet, that it almost seems a lot easier to build a life that other people want to be a part of, or to do something than it actually is, to be healthy, to grow, to move forward in life. I almost think some of our technology has done us a disservice in unintentionally leading us to believe that it's easier, that life is easier or can be easier than it actually is. One of the things that I say to entrepreneurs on a regular basis is, and this is a Malcolm Gladwell rule, that it's the 10,000 hours invested in something that gives you the chance to do it well and to be successful at it. And I think one of the reasons I've had some success in some of the things that I've done is because I haven't given up on it. And one of the things that I think we do see with young leaders and entrepreneurs is it's not hard to compare someone else's entire story or where they're at today to where we are today, and not see all of the time that went into it.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I was just thinking about that yesterday, because anybody can figure out like Squarespace or WordPress,
sure,
and hop on Canva and make graphics that look professionally designed and start sharing them on social media. And all of a sudden, my initial reaction when I see like a nice graphic or a well done website is like, they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
They've got it figured out. When it really, it's not super hard to figure those things out.
Yeah.
So it's very deceiving. The internet can be very deceiving.
Well, and that's partially, what I'm referring to is it's never been easier to put the shell out there as to, I know what I'm doing and I have a service, versus the roots and 10 years worth of experience or 10,000 hours worth of experience to actually be an influencer and have a voice that makes a difference. And it's almost as if, when you look at the unrest that we're seeing in society today, they say from an emotional standpoint, jumping into an emotion ship here, that it's a lack of control, like being put in an environment where you feel like you have no control, that generates anger. And we see this in childhood trauma a lot when a parent struggles with self-control and they have a temper, that they drive that into their child twice as fast because their child will feel that much more out of control. Or parents who use manipulation as their primary form of discipline end up creating angry children because that child doesn't, most of the time, they don't understand what's being asked of them because of the way their brain works. And so when the parent says, if you don't do this, you're not getting that push pop, or you're not getting that, whatever the treat is, or if you do that, you're going to go to bed. And in most cases, the child, because of the way their brain works, they might generally understand what's being asked of them, but they're not making the connections fast enough. And the general response to feeling out of control is anger, because no one likes being put in a situation where they feel out of control. But the problem with that is, not early on in life, but later in life, you've got to be, you have to embrace uncertainty and feeling out of control if you are going to get what you want, which is a life that other people want to be a part of. And so where I think this ties into what we opened up talking about is, we have a lot of situations where people are not being raised in environments where they're being encouraged to embrace the uncertainty and feeling out of control, and really having healthy or mature parents that can help them understand, like, first of all, be patient with them as a child and not discipline them just for not thinking quick enough or not understanding. But then also, as they grow out of that young childhood state of 1 to 10 years old, we start helping our teenagers and our preteens understand that, like, uncertainty and feeling out of control is a major part of life. And if you don't allow the situations that are out of control in your life to cause you to grow deep roots, you're never going to accomplish or receive what you want to receive and what you were actually made to receive, which is a lot of heavy, good kind of weight and influence in your life when you get older.
Yeah. It seems backwards, because the times when you really are, like, placing deep roots into the ground is when you feel the least grounded. Like, you just feel like you're floating.
Yeah.
It's a terrible feeling.
It is a terrible feeling. Everybody's talking about going to Kings Island now because it's back open, and I think you have to, like...
What's Kings Island?
Kings Island is an amusement park here in Ohio.
I know that. I'm just...
Yeah.
For all of our international listeners out there.
Yes. Good point, Mal.
Thanks.
But a lot of people are now trying to make their reservation, which you've got to give, blood and hair samples and get appointments and all.
I can't tell if you're exaggerating.
I am.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
exaggerating.
Okay.
But I guess there's a new ride that I'm going to say it's called the 5G.
Okay.
It's a really popular topic right now.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's called, but it's got this huge drop, bigger than any drop in roller coaster history, from what I hear.
Yeah, sounds awful.
Yeah, I mean, that feeling is super uncomfortable.
I hate that feeling.
Yeah.
I hate all of it.
But if you're going to become who you need to be and who you're called to be, like, you've got to experience those, and you've got to, like, no different than the roller coaster. I'm sure it's happened in history, but very, very rarely is something going to go wrong on those. It just doesn't feel good. That drop doesn't feel good. And again, I think a huge reason why we are where we are is because a lot of people have not been helped through the uncertainty and those feelings of being out of control. And obviously we have a lot of it. The uncertainty and feeling out of control, and people being raised in difficult environments. But at the end of the day, like it's not whether or not we can eliminate uncertainty or the feelings of being out of control. It's how do we embrace them, because life is full of a lot of uncertainty, and it's actually those that have learned to embrace what is in front of them that have benefited the most from it. Like Nelson Mandela is somebody I talk about all the time, that unfairly or unjustly was thrown into prison and responds the right way, and then rises to a position of power because he could communicate from a certain point of being out of control and treated unfairly, and yet responded and just believed that, in his words, life was happening for him versus to him. Mm-hmm. And that's the history of humanity, right? Like all of these injustices and things that are not fair, and that if we could change it, we would. But if we can't, if we work toward and move toward change, but yet still have to endure uncertainty and things that are out of our control in the first place, like understanding the importance of going deep in your roots, something is going to have to drive your roots deep, something. And you never want to get to a point in your life where you're no longer experiencing some sort of pressure in order to make the roots of who you are as a person go deeper into the soil. This past week, I was studying a lot of botany, big word for the study of plants. Mm-hmm. And just it's all about the soil and the roots.
Why were you studying a lot of botany?
Just because I wanted to talk about, again, I had a conversation with another entrepreneur, and unfortunately, they have gotten into a bad habit that they jump into, a certain environment, like whatever, marketing, and it goes well initially, which the first few inches of most soils are soft. Mm-hmm. And then once they reach resistance, they think that resistance is a sign of going in the wrong direction. And so then they change courses and start to get into, that next thing.
So is resistance the same as unknown?
Well, resistance is a form of feeling out of control. And it just comes back to, whether we like it or not, we live in an imperfect place, here on earth, full of imperfect people. And though we wish everything would go right, there's going to be a lot in our life that doesn't. And we can use that pressure or those feelings of being out of control or the uncertainty to drive us deeper into who am I, what is in my control, and what is out of my control, and how do I respond to the things that are out of control. Mm-hmm. And I guess, just trying to bring this all into one conversation, we need to acknowledge the things that are wrong in this country. We need to acknowledge where we have come from, what is less than ideal, and what is the correct path moving forward to make our country as good of a country as we can. At the same time, there needs to be some coaching and talking about what do we do in the meantime while we are still trying to change things as people and move forward and grow personally, but then also grow together as a whole. And I guess where we could go wrong, or where we could rob a lot of people, is just in reminding ourselves that there is an extreme amount of opportunity to respond to injustice the right way, and to recognize what is in our control, what is out of our control, and what is the best response to the things that are out of our control.
So what is responding to injustice in the right way? What does that mean?
Well, I think it's a multifaceted approach. First of all, where do we see it in our own life and in our own belief system? And what are the opportunities that the Lord has put in front of us, or that, are in front of us right now? And what can we do about it? I mean, that's the quickest way to do it, is to figure out what is in front of us and to right the wrong by making one good decision that is in front of me to make. I think the policy in voting people in is also a good solution, but we can't wait to vote people in at the top and let the results trickle down. At the end of the day, the forces on the, the troops on the ground, and all of us that say that we care about, equality and justice, need to get involved on a ground level, on a local level, and make a difference. And I think there's a tremendous amount of talk, and talk is a starting place.
Sure.
But we don't have to feel good about or feel as if we're all on the same page in order to do something today. Go do something today. Figure it out. So, but it doesn't get away from the fact that if your life is going to support, using plants and trees as an analogy here, a lot of fruit that will feed other people and take care of other people, you've got to have deep roots. Talk to me about the people that you respect. Give me examples of the people you respect. And I'll show you someone that faced a lot of uncertainty and was out of control at some point in their life. They were put in an environment where they were out of control and they had to respond the right way. And I just think that there's, again, there's a need to start a conversation, and that's why I liked the response with Hamilton, like, hey, everything's fair game, right? I did my best. You're welcome to try and take 6 years to condense it down into 2.5 hours. I did my best. And then he follows up with, it's all fair game though, right? Like, I'm going to do my best. And I think it just comes back to like, hey, like, we need to talk about these things, but at the same time, like, let's recognize how we move forward and grow and move toward a solution. And it starts with not only a conversation, but also embracing uncertainty, and being put in situations that are unfair is a part of life.
I was just having this conversation with someone yesterday, I think, who is kind of at the beginning stages of a new romantic relationship. And, there's so much.
Ooh.
Yeah, right. But it's so loaded, right? These circumstances, because there's so much desire and you want it to work. And her thing right now with this guy is that they're at that kind of hard, awkward spot where it's just so vulnerable, where they are interested in one another, but you don't know if like this is it and they're going to like jump in and be committed. Yeah. They're in that like in between. And I told her, like, you have to be in the in between if you're going to ever get to the other side.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, I thought you were getting ready to tell me you told her she has to be aggressive.
Well, that too.
If you knew Mallory's story, ladies and gentlemen, you would know she's a bit aggressive.
A little aggressive.
Just getting it done.
Yeah. And
it worked.
I got my man.
You did.
But I just told her, like, it's so uncomfortable and it's so vulnerable and it's so like awkward and there's so much unknown. Like, what is he thinking? Am I good enough for him? Is he in this with me? It's so hard. And yet you cannot be in a like lifelong committed partnership without that in between.
Yeah.
You have to go through it.
Sure.
And it looks different. It looks a little different for every couple, but life is not a Disney movie.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Like there is that terrible.
Yeah, for sure. And again, with the example of Hamilton, Disney movies typically are written off the same script, right? There's this situation that's good or it can be good or bad. And then there's a life-changing event, and then they respond to it and they overcome it and they get to where they either get to where they're supposed to be or get back to where they were. And it's just, I think what we're starting to see is that human life, all human life, to include talking about everything that has happened over the last 2 months in our country, is precious. It is like a plant. And as much as looking at the leaves and the fruit that is on the exterior of the tree is important, there is something to be said. And when studying plants and roots and life from a nature perspective, a lot has to do with the soil. A lot has to do with like where are those roots planted? Like, what is in the soil? Is the plant and the soil getting what it needs from a nutrition standpoint? And then can that plant remain in the same environment and endure the hot days and the drought and the pressure and the windstorms and all of those things in order for those roots to grow deep and for it to turn into something later in life that provides a lot of good for its environment? And I just think that, you know, again, as other people, as fame and being known, which is a real desire that we all have to know and be known, which is the definition for intimacy, is there. We tend to, in my opinion, examine from the ground up, looking at something, and the temptation as an entrepreneur or as a young person is to look at my life very early on now. Like even with my children, right? 15, 11, and 9. They're watching YouTube and different social media channels and comparing themselves to these childhood, like Nickelodeon or Disney stars, and comparing where they are in life to where those people are. And what I try to help them understand is, like, let's appreciate what they've accomplished, but they are, like, that's their story, that's their journey. They are a minority when it comes to how most young people grow up in this country and live their life. Like, let's figure out who you are and what you're intended to do. And then my responsibility as the parent is to tend to the soil that they are in and to encourage them, in some cases, to stay put and to grow and to embrace the difficulty, the uncertainty, the unfairness that exists in life.
So what does somebody do if they were raised in terrible soil? With the manipulation or the anger or both, what do you do?
Well, I mean, and again, you know, what's underneath that question of yours is, and again, it's something that I'm trying to point out, that because a lot of us have grown up in environments where manipulation and abuse happened, and unfortunately in a number of situations at the hands of religion and God being forced down our throat, we've moved away from people telling us how we should believe when it comes to a higher power. But your question exists or sits on the platform that some sort of higher standard is there, that there is right and wrong, good and bad. Specifically, there are healthy soils and there are unhealthy soils. To me, it comes back to, in answering your question, you know, if you recognize that you have been raised in an unhealthy, which that's the thing that's difficult. Often it takes years and even decades to realize that a lot of what you're seeing today is a result of being grown, right, in an unhealthy soil. And so the first step is when you can recognize that, or you start to sense that you're not healthy, or you don't like what you see, or you don't like the general response or attitude you have toward uncertainty, you're winning just to have that awareness that it's less than what you want or what you were conditioned with from a manipulation standpoint or from a correction or conflict standpoint. When you can recognize that it's not what you want, or it's not what you want to pass on to the next generation, like, you're in a really good spot. That's the first thing. The next thing that I would say is it's important to immerse yourself in other people's stories as to how they responded to their injustice or what was unfair. Or, I mean, I was looking at Chase got the book Just Mercy after he saw the movie and loved it. And he got the book and was telling me just some of the facts and, you know, talking about different people that have spent their life getting people off of death row or out of jail after having been put there unfairly. Like, there are a lot of stories out there that we can find and read and see that though our situation is bad, in 99% of the situations out there, there's somebody that has endured more than we have, and we can watch their response to see where that took them. I think, you know, a healthy place for starting as an individual in this world is, A, you're never going to be able to control everything in your life. However, B, you can be intentional about your response to what is out of control or the injustice or the uncertainty in your life. And for me, that's about as powerful of a tool that's possible. You and I having a conversation about all that's right or wrong in this world is one thing, and it's just two people's opinions. What seems to be a fact and a reality of life is, even though we are dealt situations in our life, or we are raised in an environment that is less fair than what someone else was raised in, what the story that history seems to tell is, I have an opportunity to respond to the injustice or unfairness in my life. And if I do, through watching the life of others, through reaching out to other people, through pushing through in uncertainty or pushing through the darkness, that it can serve as a catapult for influence and deep roots in my life when I do not allow what I inherited or what I was given to contaminate or ruin me.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's, again, I think we take it back to this every episode. The awareness is so important because the truth is, I would argue that nobody was raised in perfect soil.
Sure.
Like, you are failing your children just as much as I am. We all are. We're humans.
Let's not go that far.
It's humans raising humans. I am failing them a little less than you are failing yours.
It's a joke, ladies and gentlemen. Just a joke here on Emotionships.
We're just kidding. But being aware of how our soil could have been a little bit healthier, because that's how we know how to grow. So, give me a concrete, like if somebody has not spent much time experiencing the benefits of uncertainty, how do they get there now, or how do they achieve that now?
Well, I want to go off of some advice for botany for taking care of your plant.
You're really, really using this analogy.
Yeah.
Okay.
So their first point, because here was the question that this site posed, and we'll put this in the notes for you. How can I maintain my healthy roots? How can I grow or maintain healthy roots? Number one, water deeply and thoroughly when needed, which I would say speaks to self-care. That we need to speak up. We need to say what we see. We need to be advocates for justice and be the justice that we want to see in the world. But as I say in marriage counseling, you can't give what you don't have. Mm-hmm. And so as much as we were born to want to change the world around us, it starts with taking the time to water myself and to spend time in silence to make sure I'm getting everything I need to be healthy.
Yes. I think that includes having a healthy view of what self-care means. Because a lot of times people can say, oh, well, self-care, I'm not going to have this conversation with you. When really, it's a way of avoiding the unknown, right?
And in a lot of cases, self-care is an invitation to disappointment, because that's what they have experienced a lot in their life. And, again, God has impregnated the universe with truth. And I think as we talk about right and wrong, healthy and unhealthy, the reason why I'm advocating learning from plants here in this situation, though it might not seem serious enough to some, is there are healthy plants and there are unhealthy plants. Mm-hmm. And that might be healthy, or that might be a better place to start with people's understanding of how society needs to function. We're not trying to fix a plant because we think that its leaves are ugly or what have you, that it's in the wrong place or it doesn't belong. It just comes back to every plant deserves to be healthy and to accomplish its purpose. And so drilling down on what do I need to do in order to put myself in the best position to fulfill my purpose in life? Number one, water deeply and thoroughly, right? Invest in self-care.
Which might look like what?
I think it really starts off with, mapping out for yourself, like, what are your objectives? what do you see through the lens of your life with what you're passionate about and interested in? Most people have a sense of what they're passionate about or what their purpose is. If you don't have that, then it comes back to like what gets you excited. What needs to be happening in order for you to wake up in the morning and be excited about the day and you hop out of bed versus feeling miserable. If you are in a place where you don't have that, find someone who does. Find someone that can help you sift through all of your trauma that has suppressed excitement. Like, again, getting into the emotion ships of it all. The people that can't get excited about their life or the people that are overly pessimistic are people that have a lot of childhood trauma and don't even know it. Mm-hmm. Because if mom and dad had a bad relationship, or the one parent or both parents that were raising us were unhealthy, what they probably did was manipulate you or use their attitude or their sense of happiness and what was going right or what was going wrong. That influenced you as a child. And what children that have been raised in unhealthy environments stop doing is trying and dreaming because it's always wrong.
Yeah.
And so if you can't be optimistic and if you're not excited about life, like if you just feel like you're managing life today, you have childhood trauma, and you need to understand that dreaming and being excited about life is something that healthy plants and healthy people do. They're excited to fulfill their purpose. And so if that's not you, that's fine. Go find someone like, if you're in Ohio or if you're not in Ohio, we have people fly in from all over the country. Go to bodygaragedayton.com and look at some of the services that are there to get trauma out of you so that like that air can rise and you can start being excited about life again. And so that's where I would start and just say that, if you find that, a lot of your life is in a defensive posture where you are afraid to try or to believe that life can be good and you can be excited about it, just stop right there and understand that that's a trauma response. Yeah. That's built-in trauma. Here, number 2, feed your soil so you can feed your plants. So again, social media and just this fast-paced, always connected culture has us constantly looking at the fruit and the leaves that are on other people's tree. Mm-hmm. That's not the way to grow anything in your life. You can take advice from how you want your website to look or how you want your podcast to sound, but at the end of the day, life is controlled in the soil. Life is happening in the soil. And so, yes, we have to embrace uncertainty and the things that are unfair and that feel out of control with a controlled response. But you can still feed your soil in order to grow who you are at your core. And that just comes back to, with you asking, what do we do? Find a couple of priorities or values that you want to be in your life. One of the things that I've said to my children all the time, and so far it's working, is just like being honest is better than being right. Mm-hmm. And so Amy and I have purposely tried to create an environment where I rather them tell me what they did wrong than give me the right answer.
Sure.
And so come up with 3 to 4 values and live into those by reading about them and studying them, those virtues to feed your soil. Mm-hmm. Because what is in your soil and at close to your heart is what's going to determine later in life how healthy and strong your branches are, which strong branches come from a strong trunk, which come from strong roots, which come from a strong soil. Yep. And they all result in a lot of heavy fruit that takes care of the people around you and drops seeds into the ground that go on for generations, multiple generations. And ultimately, at the end of the day, as I've tried to advocate for, I think this is really what we're seeing is a manifestation of people that are crying out for fruitfulness and being someone whose life impacts the life of others in a positive way. But we're in a unique period of time where we've gotten distracted and haven't focused on what kind of environment or culture does healthy soil look like. Children that are raised in environments that are unhealthy are going to have unhealthy habits and unhealthy views of the world. Another thing here is be gentle when planting, relocating, or repotting. Do not disturb or break the roots. This is my advice to entrepreneurs, right? For heaven's sakes, quit uprooting yourself.
Yeah.
Stay planted, stay grounded, stay potted. You have to be careful when you are relocating your roots every 3 years. I don't care how good the soil is. And this is what someone who knows plants will tell you. If you uproot every 3 years because you don't like the feelings that it takes or the injustice or unfairness that it takes to get your roots to go deep enough to have large impact, you're never going to have that large impact.
Yeah.
I mean, secular, non-secular, study people who have changed the world. They are people that stayed planted even when there was uncomfortable pressure. You got to do it. You got to do it. And you're never going to get to a place where you're not going to get to that place that you want to be when you're relocating or repotting yourself every time you experience something that's unfair. And so I love it that it just says, be gentle. Be gentle when planting, relocating, or repotting. It's an amazing thing. Don't disturb or break the roots.
I think I've asked you this before, of how you know in business or relationships, when is the time to replant or to move on?
Well, I think it needs to be the exception to the rule, that it happens. And listen, part of growth is relocating and repotting, right? That a plant will actually outgrow its pot and need to be put somewhere else. But you can't count on one hand how many times that is in your life. And so there's a difference between repotting or relocating because you've outgrown where you are, and it's very clear that if you don't do something, you're going to stunt your growth, and the roots being the same size and always uprooting or relocating it because you don't like it. Hey, listen to me. You don't be a little baby. Don't change and uproot yourself or repot yourself just because you're facing pressure. All of the people that inspire me that I have been around, and this is true of most people, endured hardship and they thought they were going to die. So if you feel like you're going to die going through your startup or even just surviving the environment that you're living in right now, make sure that is not prescribed pressure for you where that pressure is intended to take you deeper and you're wanting to remove yourself because it's hard. You can't be someone that runs. And again, it just says be gentle when planting, relocating, or repotting because you don't want to disturb or break the roots. And so, the other piece of advice that I would give is if that's you and you do need to repot or relocate, you need to be gentle and you need to move slow and you need to do it with a lot of other people giving you advice.
Right.
Don't do it on your own, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah, don't ghost everybody.
And then another thing is, last piece of advice here is it says, add a 2 to 3 inch buffer after planting that can help the roots cool and stay moist. The buffer, which could be mulch or pine needles, will prevent weed growth. And I think that buffer is margin in our life. I think it can manifest in multiple ways. I think it can manifest through our schedule and how we treat our schedule and just giving ourselves extra time to create. I think it can also be with the people that we put around ourselves, that we can put people around our root system or around ourselves, especially when we are new to something or we're experiencing a lot of growth, that can kind of help us filter everything out, that can kind of help keep certain things away from us. And that's an important part of being an entrepreneur as well, is that you have a certain amount of people that are around you that can say, hey, that doesn't look right. Hey, your attitude seems off. Is everything okay? Hey, I don't think that's a good decision. Does this make, ask questions. Does this make sense in light of our values here? That we all need a small buffer around us, a filter that can call us out when we seem to be going off course, or maybe we get lured into making a get-rich-quick type decision.
And how do you know that you have the right people? Especially if you're coming from a place where you're working on getting increasingly healthy. Do you have the barometer to be able to tell that the right people are surrounding you?
I think that's something you learn over time. I would say figure out your values again, right? And in the business world, they call these like core behaviors or core values. Behavioral values is what Patrick Lencioni says. And then find the people that have those values in their life as a habit, not as an objective. Find the people that really live into those behaviors versus like they practice those. That's who they are versus things that they're aspiring toward. And you're going to get it wrong.
Sure.
Right? You're not going to get it right your first time. But again, that's the value of persistence and staying in the game. Like life is one huge learning lesson.
Brene Brown says that, this is the gist of what she says. I don't know the exact quote, but it's something about the importance is in getting it right, not in being right.
Yeah.
And when all we want is to be right, you're not going to grow much.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I think, as usual, the entrepreneurs of this world need to step up and stop waiting on the government to solve some of this social unrest. At the end of the day, one of the easiest things in the world to do is to look at you because of the color of your skin or where you were raised or how you talk or what your education is or how much money you make and make that the bad guy. When the reality of it is that there is a lot of uncertainty and feelings that come with being out of control or being treated unjustly that can be changed and severely minimized when we help people find their purpose and passion. They say in the sports world that winning takes care of a lot of the sins or mistakes, that people aren't at each other's throats. And I know this from being in many locker rooms. When you're winning, I can when a team is winning, I can very quickly get over the bad pass that you made out of bounds because we still won.
Right.
When we're losing, and I know this from coaching, when we're losing as a team, man, everybody is sensitive because at the end of the day, people were made to win and people want to win. And so again, do we have a responsibility to enter the story and to listen to people and to start on the right foot with hearing them and believing them? 100%. But there's a lot of potential looking at human history to say that a lot of this is a manifestation of people not feeling close enough to or in tune with their sense of purpose and passion for life.
I want to include, just you spoke about childhood trauma.
Yes.
Which if somebody is starting to wake up to the truth of that in their experience.
Yeah.
You mentioned bodygarageDayton.com, but also there's a number that someone can text if they are feeling a lot of feelings about that and need some grounding. 937-303-4788.
Text the number, ladies and gentlemen. We're here to help.
Yeah. I mean, just reach out. If that's something that's like sending somebody swirling, I want them to know that they can contact us.
100%.
Cool.
Ladies and gentlemen, episode 24. Boy, are we growing rapidly.
Phew. Great soil.
Until next time.